Good morning, dear students of class 8. Welcome to this online English class. And today we are going to continue further the lesson, The Selfish Giant, Part 3. Now, here in this slide, you see picture of two giants. One is captioned as Selfish Giant and the other is Transformed Changed Giant. So in part 1 we studied about the giant who was very selfish and he did not allow children to play in his garden. But then one day he realized how selfish he was by not allowing the children to play in his garden. And because of this selfish nature, his garden no longer was beautiful. Always there was snow, frost in his garden and no blossoms. But one day when he found children entering his garden through a small hole in the wall, and because of the entry of children, the garden had changed. It had become beautiful. He realized his mistake and he decided to break the wall and he changed from selfish giant to a kind giant. Now let us recap quickly part 2. The Selfish Giant by Oscar Wilde. Giant's garden no longer beautiful, because he had not allowed children in his garden. And this made Giant sad because there was always snow and frost in his garden and no spring. But one day he saw a beautiful sight. There was change in the giant, and the change was that he decided to allow the children in his garden. The children were happy and the giant changed from a selfish giant to kind giant. The result was his garden once again was beautiful. So we studied this in part 2. Today we are going to further continue this lesson. So everyone was happy. You can see in this picture how the children are enjoying, they are playing, and they look very happy. And because of this happiness, even the garden is looking so beautiful. From selfish giant, the giant had become a kind giant. And he allowed little children in his garden. He used to sit and see them playing, and he was very happy. Seasons maintained their natural cycle. All day long the children played, and in the evening they came to the giant to bid goodbye. Just see, after playing, they are returning back home, and while returning back home, they used to wish the giant. But where is your little companion? He said, the boy I put into the tree. He missed that small child who had changed his garden and had kissed him. He wanted to know, where is that little boy? The giant loved him the best because he had kissed him. We don't know, answered the children. He has gone away. The children said they do not know about this child. As he must have gone away. Every afternoon when school was over, the children came and they played with the giant. But the little boy whom the giant loved was never seen again. And the giant missed this little boy. And the seasons, they maintained their natural cycle. And there was always happiness in his garden because of the small children who were allowed by the giant. Now, the children played with him. Years went over. The giant grew very old and feeble. The giant became very weak. He became very old. He could not play any more, so he sat in a huge armchair and watched the children at their games and admired his garden. One winter morning, he looked out of his window as he was dressing. It was certainly a marvelous sight. In the farthest corner of the garden was a tree quite covered with lovely white blossoms. Its branches were all golden, and silver fruit hung down from them, and underneath it stood the little boy he had loved. So he was happy to see this little boy standing under the tree. The giant had become very old. Now the giant was very happy. He ran downstairs in great joy, came near to the child, but when he came quite close, his face grew red with anger, and on the palms of the child's hands were prints of 2 nails, and the prints of 2 nails were on the little feet. He got very angry because he saw that the child's palm there were prints of nails and even on his feet. Who had dared to wound thee? Cried the giant. Tell me, and I may take my big sword and slay him. The giant was very angry. Who has given you these wounds, injuries? I am going to take my sword and I am going to kill that man. Nay, answered the child, but these are the wounds of love. The child said that no, these injuries are of love. Who art thou? Said the giant. And a strange awe fell on him, and he knelt before the little child. The giant said, Who are you? And suddenly, all around the child, a very strange awe halo fell all around him, and the giant knelt down before the little child, because this little child was not an ordinary child. The child smiled on the giant and said to him, You let me play once in your garden today, you shall come with me to my garden, which is paradise. He said that you allowed me to play in your garden, and now you are going to come with me to my garden, and my garden is paradise. My garden is heaven. So this little boy was God who had come to the giant to take him away to his kingdom of heaven. God came and honored the giant and take him to his abode. And take him to his abode home, that is, take him to heaven. And when the children ran in that afternoon, they found the giant lying dead under the tree, all covered with white blossoms. The giant was lying dead, and white blossoms had fallen from the tree, and covered the giant. When the little children came, they saw this sight. The giant, from a selfish giant, had become a kind giant, and God had himself come to take the giant to his kingdom of heaven. So let us recapitulate the lesson. The selfish giant, Oscar Wilde. Giant's garden once again became beautiful. Children were happy. Giant from selfish giant had become a kind giant. But he was missing that little child. But one day he saw the little child, the little boy. And this little boy was God who had come to take away the giant to heaven. So the little boy had come to take this kind giant to heaven. So the selfish giant had changed from a selfish giant to a kind giant. And his garden remained beautiful where children played and were happy. So we have finished this lesson. You are going to go through the text of this lesson once again and come up with your problems if you have any. And tomorrow we are going to take up the question answers of this lesson. Thank you, students.